Okay, today we have arrived at biblical timeline number 25, which is titled But Now. But I wanted to kind of do a review on our timeline. We started way back here at Adam and Eve. And from Adam and Eve to Abraham, we covered a period of about 2,000 years that are covered from about Genesis chapter 1 to Genesis chapter 12, as far as we know. And in this area right here, God seems to deal with the human race as one. And we're going to call this, for the purpose of our study, the beginning. This was the beginning of the Bible. And the next thing that happens is we come and we run into a transition period from Abraham that God chose out. We run into a transition where he has a son named Isaac, who has a son named Jacob, whose name is changed to Israel. And he ends up being in Egypt. And eventually they become slaves in Egypt until Moses leads them out. And this period of transition is a period of time that we go from concentrating in the Bible to the human race as a whole and bringing it down to where we're going to have a special people which are called the Israelites. And that takes about 500 years. From that point where Moses brings the Israelites out and takes them to Mount Sinai where they receive the law, from that point until the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, the Bible deals with the Jews. That's primarily what it's concentrating on. It mentions Gentiles, but it really just in relation to the Jews themselves. So in this period of time, it's about 1,500 years. It goes from Exodus 19 to the end of the Gospels, or early Acts. And we'll call this time past. This is time past, or actually the Apostle Paul calls it that. And then we have another time of transition where, and it's in the book of Acts. And it lasts for about 30 years, from about the death of our Lord up until AD about 60. And we go from seeing Peter and the law at the beginning to where we see grace and Paul towards the end. So this is a transition period to grace. And then comes the period of grace, and it involves the books in the Bible from Romans that Paul wrote to Philemon. And again, it covers a period of years, the writing of them of about 15 years. And in here, Paul is talking to the church. He's not talking to Jews, he's not talking to Gentiles, but he's talking to what he calls one new man, Jew and Gentile. And this, so far until today, in the Bible, it stopped nearly 2,000 years ago, the writing of it. But until today, it's lasted, this period of time, nearly 2,000 years. And this is the period of time, this is called But Now. And this is the period of time that we're going to talk about today. We've covered all this time, all the way up to our time, which is But Now. Am I walking slowly, Anna? Mm-hmm. Okay. So, to begin with, we'll use this other board right here, and we'll kind of get everything a little bit smaller, and we'll go. Remember, the beginning was that time in Genesis, and times past is the time of the Old Testament, all the way up to early Acts, and we're going to cover that first. Let's go to Ephesians chapter 2, verses 11 and 12. Where Paul tells us in Ephesians chapter 2, verses 11 and 12, he says, "Wherefore remember that ye, being in time past, Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcision, by that which is called circumcision in the flesh made by hands, that at that time you were without Christ, being aliens from the commonwealth of Israel, and strangers from the covenants of promise, having no hope, and without God in the world." So boy, that's describing a very terrible position for us. It's saying that the circumcision were the Jews. And it's saying that we were not part of them. We were part of the uncircumcision, which means the Gentiles. And that time lasted from the time that Israel was chosen as a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. God chose them. The prophets were sent to them, and Jesus Christ came to minister to them. Let's read Romans chapter 15, verse 8. Chapter 15, verse 8. where Paul tells us, he says, "Now I say that Jesus Christ was a minister of the circumcision for the truth of God to confirm the promises made unto the fathers." So he's saying that Jesus Christ was a minister. What does of the circumcision mean? It means to the Jews, that he came to minister to the Jews, to preach to the Jews. That would shock most Christians, is to understand that Jesus Christ didn't come to talk to Gentiles. He came to talk to the Jews. And it says about what? About the truth of God to confirm the promises made unto the fathers. All this is talking about times past, the Old Testament. The promises were made in the Old Testament to the fathers. And Jesus Christ came to confirm those promises about a kingdom and a king. Let's go to Matthew chapter 10, verses 5 to 7, which is in times past. That's before the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Matthew chapter 10, verses 5 to 7. And our Lord is getting ready to send his apostles out to talk to people. Matthew chapter 10, verses 5 to 7. "These 12 Jesus sent forth, and commanded them, saying, Go not into the way of the Gentiles, and into the city of the Samaritans enter ye not." He's telling them to stay away from the people like us. He says, "But go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." He says, don't go to the Gentiles, go to Israel. "And as you go, preach, saying, The kingdom of heaven is at hand." So, the kingdom of heaven, which is at hand, was the kingdom that's been promised since way back in the Old Testament. All this time, in times past, it's been promised. And who's it being offered to?
The Jews.
The Jews, to Israel. It's not being offered to the Gentiles. Let me show you what he said to the Gentiles. Let's go to Matthew chapter 15. And this is when a Gentile lady approached him because she was in need of help. She needed a miracle. Matthew chapter 15, verses 21 to 24. So he's doing what he's supposed to be doing. He's preaching to the Jewish nation. "Then Jesus went hence and departed into the coasts of Tyre and Sidon. And behold, a woman of Canaan came out of the same coasts and cried unto him, saying, Have mercy on me, O Lord, thou son of David. My daughter is grievously vexed with a devil." So she's in need of help. "But he answered her not a word. And his disciples came and besought him, saying, Send her away, for she crieth after us." She's bothering us. "But he answered and said, I am not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel." Now we know, those of us who studied, that in the end he relented and he helped her. And he healed her daughter. But that's not the point. The point is